BMW have quite a funny history with electric vehicles. Back in 2013, they were one of the first big names to really embrace EVs with a custom-built, from the ground up electric car in the form of the i3. It was very good, but also very quirky, and not a lot of people bought it. But times have moved on, and everybody and their grandmother is now selling an electric car. So BMW knew they had to come back and make an even bigger splash, and they've tried it with this, the iX3, which, in case you hadn't noticed, is basically just an X3 with the oily bits removed and batteries and a motor crammed inside. In fact, you might not even be able to tell it's an electric car unless you look really closely. And then you might spot the BMW badge has a little bit of blue accenting around it, because blue signifies the planet and they're here to save the planet. There's also a really smooth grille, which looks a bit like some beaver's teeth. And at the side, an I logo plus smooth, aerodynamically optimized wheels that don't hurt the air as you drive along or something. Plus at the back, 0 exhaust pipes and an iX3 logo. But apart from that, it's all very, very normal.
It's worth pointing out that BMW is about to facelift this car from December 2021, so future versions will have a more aggressive, less smooth bumper at the front and slightly more interesting and sculpted lights at the rear, which are a neat improvement. But underneath, that version will be the same as this one.
Let's have a quick look inside. Obviously the facelifted version will be tweaked as well, so it will have a slightly different infotainment screen, slightly different leather materials, and a tweaked center console, but largely the two will be very, very similar, and that's a good thing because BMW do interiors very well. One of the things I love is the fact that they still rely on physical buttons and knobs. Knob gang, I know you're with me, so you can turn the volume up and down with the physical volume knob and adjust the heating, which makes it a lot easier and more intuitive when you're on the move. Interestingly, BMW also provide gesture controls, so you can move your finger in the air to control the volume, or move your thumb that way or that way to skip to the next track or the next radio station, or if a call is coming in, you can dismiss it by doing that, which is a really nice touch. As for the screens, you get a nice big clear driver display which presents a lot of neat information, and also a lovely infotainment system which is easily controlled using this iDrive controller on the center console. And you also get Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, which is a nice touch. Oh, one more thing, how could I forget? BMW have partnered with the legendary composer Hans Zimmer, the guy responsible for so many really memorable film scores like Gladiator or The Lion King or Interstellar, and also Going for Gold, the TV show in the UK, classic, to produce the sounds for the iX3. So if I turn it on, you get that sound, and off. Stick around, I'll play you some more from Mr. Hans Zimmer a bit later on.
As for rear space, well, it's not bad, given that this is essentially a petrol car that's been converted to electric. It's actually the same as its petrol cousins. Rear legroom is more than adequate for 6-footers, as is headroom, and you can expect all the usual creature comforts back there, including USB ports, rear climate control, cup holders, and all the rest. The only downside is that it still has a transmission tunnel, so there's an unsightly hump in the middle of the floor, taking up space. Boot space is good though. It's certainly smaller than one you get in the petrol or diesel X3 by 40 litres or so, but the 510 litre total is more than adequate room for a couple of suitcases or a weekly family shop.
Okay, let me give you the main facts and stats for the BMW iX3 to try and put this thing into some kind of context. There's only one version of this car, although there are a couple of trim levels and a few options, so it's actually quite easy to wrap your head around which one to buy because there's only one. The price is around £61,000. That's £5,000 more than a Tesla Model Y and £5,000 less than a Jaguar I-Pace, and around the same as what you'd pay for an Audi e-tron. So is it expensive? Yes, but not as expensive as some of its rivals. As for the battery, well, no choices there either. You get an 80 kilowatt hour lithium ion battery pack, although only 74 kilowatt hours of that is actual usable capacity, because they like to keep some extra capacity spare in order to not use the entire battery and preserve battery health over the life of the vehicle. The official range is 285 miles, although I'll tell you my real world range a little bit later on. Stick around. As for motor options, again, there's only one. It's a single motor driving the rear wheels. So yes, it's rear wheel drive, which is kind of typical BMW really, but in this part of the market, I think all of its rivals do offer an all-wheel drive version. So if you live in an area with a steep hill perhaps, and you encounter the odd fierce winter, then it's worth bearing in mind that this might not have as much traction getting up a steep icy hill as some of its rivals. In terms of traction, even on a fairly damp day, it's absolutely fine. And in terms of power, it's okay as well. It makes 286 horsepower, which isn't mind-blowing, but it's enough for 0 to 62 in 6.8 seconds. And because it's got 400 Newton meters of torque, a fairly healthy amount, when you accelerate from a reasonably low speed, it does take off quite nicely. You've got lots and lots of force for overtaking, for example. So what's it like to drive? Nice. Nice is probably the best way of summing it up. It feels like a normal X3, but better, because it's quieter and it's more refined and it's smoother, and you haven't got the vibrations from a diesel engine making it feel a little bit sort of rickety. So in that sense, it's a lovely car to drive. You sit a lot higher in this car than probably in any of its rivals, and that gives you quite a lot of visibility everywhere you go, which is actually very handy on roads like this, for example, where it's lined with hedgerows and you need a little bit of visibility around the bends to see who might be walking towards you or whether there's a car coming in your direction. The refinement levels are actually quite good in this car. You can hear a little bit of road noise, but nothing too intrusive. Apart from that, the main sound you hear is from that synthesized note created by Mr. Hans Zimmer, who made the sounds for this Bimmer. Let me show you what you experience. I'll put it in sport mode, which is where it's at its loudest. I'll put my foot down. It's not amazing, is it really? I mean, it's just sort of one note that changes pitch depending on how long you keep your foot pinned, and it's not inspiring. I think Mr. Zimmer's probably laughing all the way to the bank with that one. My favorite synthesized electric engine note of all time is made by the Mercedes EQS. That sounds brilliant. Hans, step your game up.
The suspension is on the firm side, as it is with most electric cars, but it's more than tolerable and certainly smoother than you'll find in, say, a Tesla Model X. It's a nice, comfortable car to cruise around in with your family.
The steering is really lovely in this car. It's got such a progressive feel to it. It's light enough to be easy to maneuver around town in a car park, for example, but it also has enough weight to it to feel really confidence-inspiring around these bends. It probably is, I think, the best steering in an electric SUV, and that's saying something. Look at this. I'm approaching a right-hander right now, scrub off a little bit of speed, throw it in, and it gives you so much confidence. There's so much grip, so much traction on the exit that it's actually a very enjoyable car to drive. BMW likes to bang on about being the ultimate driving machine, and you can really see that they wanted this car to be fun. It is. A quick word now on the brakes, which are fantastic in this car. They're really strong, really confidence-inspiring, but they also feel very consistent. They feel like brakes on a normal car, which isn't always the case in an electric vehicle. You have several different levels of regeneration. You can't control it using paddles behind the steering wheel because there aren't any, but you can control it using a menu on the main infotainment screen. So you can choose between high, medium, and low levels of regeneration. And the more regen you get, the more aggressively the car slows down when you lift off the accelerator. There's also a one pedal driving mode. If I knock the transmission stick into B, then if I lift off completely, the car should come to a complete standstill. Let me just test that theory. Yep, completely static, and then off you go again using only one pedal, which can be quite useful. But the important thing is that you have choice in how the brakes feel.
Now, in terms of range, as I've mentioned, the official WLTP figure is 279. However, in my hands on a mild winter's morning, the car reported 3 miles per kilowatt hour on average, which works out to be 222 miles of real-world range. Not bad for this size of vehicle, but equally not the best I've seen either. As for charging, the iX3 will accept up to 150 kilowatts, so it'll go from 10% to 80% in about half an hour. Not bad.
So in summary then, how does the iX3 stack up against the very fierce competition on the market today? Well, on paper, maybe not very well, because let's face it, it's more expensive than the current king, the Tesla Model Y, and it's nowhere near as fast or as spacious as the Model Y, or indeed even the Jaguar I-Pace, and it's maybe not as technologically advanced as an Audi e-tron. Doesn't even have all-wheel drive. There's a lot that BMW didn't get right with the iX3, and yet it's so good to drive that it probably does make up for all of those shortcomings. If you're looking for a high-riding electric SUV that importantly looks normal and does pretty much everything you'll want of it without any fuss, then the iX3 is definitely one to consider.